Good afternoon. I'm Bill Graham. I'm the Vice Chair of the NGO Committee for Education, Learning, and Literacy at the United Nations and the President of the Rotary Dare to Be Great Global E-Club. I'm also a representative to the UN for the Italian Diplomatic Academy and the Young Global Leadership Foundation. It's my honor to moderate this session on UN75, an opportunity to focus the masses on achieving Vision 2030. The future we want and the future we could have if all the SDGs were achieved in all parts of the world for all people. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panel for today. Mariam Nassif from Beirut, Lebanon. Mariam has participated in leadership and organizational roles in several large-scale global conferences, including here at the United Nations, involving thousands of exceptional youth from around the world. Naomi Ekpoki from Abuja, Nigeria. Naomi is the founder and CEO of Cinema Love Foundation and a UN 2020 champion of disarmament. Omer Montoya from Guadalajara, Mexico. Omer has been a multi-year Red Cross Mexico volunteer and a World Economic Forum Global Shaper youth leader. And Jerica Whitlock from New York, USA. Jerica is an American businesswoman who introduced the SDG World Awards and Nadava Mandela's 100 Mandelas at the United Nations. Thank you all for participating today. Today's event is focused on UN75. Yes, it commemorates the 75th anniversary of the UN, but it's more than that. Already in 2019, looking forward to 2020, the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, Secretary General was talking about how the world is facing more global problems today than at almost any time in history, some of which are potentially existential: climate change, disruptive science and technology, pandemics, growing inequality, and more countries experiencing conflict today than at any point in the last 30 years. At a time where there are so many global problems that can only be solved through international cooperation and collaboration, we are seeing more and more people losing faith in international institutions like the UN. The Secretary General says multilateralism is under fire precisely when we need it most. As a result, he sees UN 75 is not a time for celebrating. Rather, we must leverage the 75th anniversary of the UN to get people to reevaluate and recognize the need for and the value of multilateral efforts and international institutions to address some of the major problems the world is facing. So what's the UN's strategy for accomplishing that goal? The UN seeks to engage as many people as possible in dialogue regarding the future we want and the problems facing the world. This initiative is called the Join the Conversation campaign. There's a massive publicity campaign calling for people all over the world to engage in dialogue. The plans initially were to promote a lot of face-to-face town hall-like meetings for those dialogues. Obviously, because of COVID, most of the discussions are now taking place online or by a big push to have people participate in an online survey. So how is that coming along? How likely are we to achieve the Secretary General's goals? Comments, anyone?
So far, for example, the Join the Conversation campaign has resulted in a little bit over 1 million people, and that's less than one person for every 7,000 participating and taking a few minutes to complete a relatively broad survey. That means 6,999 people out of 7,000 probably have no knowledge of this initiative and have not given any thought to what is needed or desired.
Plus, an even smaller number of people spending a few hours one time in a discussion round about the future they want.
In addition, the Secretary General said he was particularly interested in engaging those who are not already fans of international cooperation and the UN in conversation. But the survey shows that almost all of the participants think it is essential that countries work together. That does not look like the broad cross-section of skeptics he was seeking to dialogue with.
Honestly, I have doubt this is going to have that big of an impact on the attitude and opinions of a significant share of 7.5 billion people in the world.
Why are we not achieving the goals?
Michelangelo said, The problem for most people is not that they set goals too high and fail, but that they set goals too low and succeed.
I think the UN75 goals are not high enough. Where are the goals aimed at reaching millions of people?
Where are the goals that get people engaged for extended periods of weeks and months?
And where are the goals getting tens or even hundreds of millions of people to see themselves as global citizen heroes?
Where are the goals that aim to get the media and masses talking about the UN, international corporation, the problems that face the world, the SDGs, etc., almost every other day?
It would seem that these are the kind of goals it would take to have any significant impact on the attitude and opinions of the general public in countries around the world.
We need to set UN 75 goals based on what's needed and not what we think we can do.
What kind of goals would it take then for a goal to be able to change the mindset of a significant share of the world population?
Well, as we said before, we need to set goals based on what is needed and not what we think we can do.
The United Nations Secretary General said that most people are turning their backs on international corporations and institutions at a time where we need them even more and we need to work together even more.
And that we need to revitalize public recognition of the need for and value of multilateralism to combat the many, some existential problems facing us.
A meaningful change in public opinion requires a significant share of the entire world population to share the desired opinion regarding not only international cooperation or multilateralism and institutions, but also a willingness to support the achievement of our shared goals, the SDGs.
This will require a deeper understanding of the problems facing the world and the magnitude of potential dangers they represent than can be accomplished in a questionnaire completed in minutes or even a discussion of a few hours.
What kind of public engagement are you thinking of to bring that deeper understanding about?
We need to find ways that keep these ideas about the future we want, the world's major problems, and the need for multilateralism in the forefront of people's minds for at least a few months.
And what do you mean by a significant share of the entire global population?
I don't think a few million spending a few minutes to a few hours will bring about the desired mindset.
Yeah, I think we need to aim to have at least a few 100 million actively engaged in activities that deepen understanding for the problems that the world is facing, the need for cooperation and collaboration to effectively address these problems, but also the world we could have if we successfully address all of these problems.
Let me summarize. You're saying you want to get hundreds of millions of people actively engaged in some kind of activities and more than 1 billion people following news of those activities to bring about a greater appreciation for the need for global cooperation to take on the serious problems facing the world. You do realize, don't you, that just stating such an objective is enough for many people to categorize you as totally crazy?
Shortly after inspiring a nation by saying the US would put a man on the moon in 10 years, US President John F. Kennedy said, "We don't yet know how we are going to do it, but we are going to do it anyway."
Former Liberian president and Nobel Peace Prize winner Ellen Johnson Sirleaf said, "Your dreams should always exceed your current capacity to achieve them."
Not to mention that Steve Jobs said those who are crazy enough to believe they can change the world are the ones who do.
That's what we are.
As we've said, the only thing that is truly impossible is that which is not attempted, and your chance of hitting what you don't even aim at are zero.
The problem is that when most people hear goals they think are impossible, they don't even make an attempt to think about how they might be able to achieve them.
What will happen if we can get a few people of influence to stop for a moment and we can show them a way that they believe these goals are achievable? What happens when people suddenly see a way to achieve something they feel is highly desirable that they have previously thought was impossible? We believe many will jump on the chance to be a part of making it happen.
So you believe you see a believable path by which you can get hundreds of millions of people actively engaged in activities that would make them more likely to appreciate the severity of the challenges the world is facing and the value of international cooperation and institutions in effectively taking on these challenges. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People will not act unless they can see a desirable result, and they'll still not act unless they can see a path that they believe can achieve that goal. Do you believe you have a path that people will see as believable for mobilizing such great numbers of people?
For sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Now you have everyone curious. Tell us how.
The purpose of this section. Imagine what it would mean for the mindset of the world and for having a chance to achieve the SDGs. Hundreds of millions were to be actively engaged in pumping up the desire for a better world and actively engaged in some activities to dramatically better the world.
Seeing our programs of initiatives as a viable path that could result in getting hundreds of millions of people to act in a way that both brings about a great good in the world, but also shapes their attitudes about wanting to do significant good and their confidence in being able to have massive impact on the world.
Well, thinking this is totally doable. Let's do it.
So first of all, how do we imagine we might get hundreds of million people engaged in doing anything, let alone something that for an extended period has to do with the UN or SDGs or building a better world while building a positive mindset about bettering the world in tens or hundreds of millions of participants?
We need something that is so simple and simple to understand that there is no reason anyone would not participate. We need something that's considered such a positive thing that the natural inclination of most people would be to participate. Has to be easy to publicize and promote. It could even be considered patriotic to one's country or community. And finally, creates positive publicity opportunities for all those who promote it. But even more so, this idea was proposed by a group of 9 and 10-year-olds.
And guess what? A readathon.
A readathon is cause in its own right. I mean, who is against improving reading skills?
A readathon creates opportunities to raise money to be able to serve a great cause.
A readathon is very easy for people to grasp the concept.
A readathon takes almost no preparation or lead time to implement.
A readathon creates opportunities for many to become involved in promoting and supporting the readathon.
A world figure of influence would issue a global appeal for young students around the world to show their solidarity with something by reading as many hours as they can during a given month.
This will be followed by a massive publicity campaign from global to every local community to maximize participation by primary and lower secondary schools.
Then a parallel campaign would encourage pledges of donations for every hour read by students during the readathon to be used for an exceptionally good cause that the children themselves can identify with. For example, reducing the number of children in the world who are not attending school due to hunger or extreme poverty. This should serve as a significant incentive to schools and students to participate.
It will be announced that at the end of the readathon, participating students would be declared to be global citizen heroes and receive certificates of heroism in a big local heroes award ceremony organized by local service clubs and similar organizations.
Teachers and school administrators can easily register their classes to participate through a computer or a smartphone.
Additional aspects will be announced that will elevate the hero status of participating students and keep it going over an extended period.
Now, let's just imagine if the Secretary General were to make a big deal, press or media appeal that all schools and children commemorate the 75th anniversary of the UN. Or the end of COVID lockdowns, World Literacy Month, Nelson Mandela's birthday, or any internationally recognized event or day.
Let's imagine further that many national leaders, the international and national media, the ministers of education were to echo that appeal and add to it their personal request that the young people of their country demonstrate to the world what great readers they are. In other words, make it a matter of national pride.
Imagine that local Rotary, Lions, and other organizations make it their mission to echo these appeals in every community and in every school across the world, and up the stakes by announcing community rep rallies, encouraging students in their communities to read like crazy during the readathon, and by announcing that after the readathon, there would be an awards ceremony in every community to honor the students and the schools who participate and make special awards to their schools that achieved exceptional average numbers of hours read per student for their class, school, etc. And there would be national award events for schools and even entire cities that had highest average number hours read per student.
Imagine that all kinds of celebrities, businesses, local media, libraries, bookstores, including TV, publicly promoted participation, citing the importance to local pride and maybe even announce some additional awards or prizes.
Imagine teachers and school administrator associations and other stakeholders inform their members that they were partners in this initiative and encourage all their members to get fully behind the readathon.
What kind of participation rates do you think that might result in?
Now imagine the impact if Bill Gates, Jack Ma, Mark Zuckerberg, or some other big name philanthropists were to come out and announce that they or a coalition of philanthropies would pledge an amount for every hour read for the first billion hours read, or even $100 million. The idea is an announcement that would get all the media reporting it and everyone talking about it. It would be enough if they just announced the establishment of a pledge fund with the goal of getting people pledges from major philanthropies, corporations, wealthy individuals, etc., of $1 billion.
Then imagine that every few days for the next several weeks, different organizations, individuals, and other parties held press events announcing that they were pledging some significant amount to the Pledge Foundation. This would result in the media reporting daily about the growth of the fund and reminding people about the readathon.
Imagine there were daily interviews with teachers and students describing what they thought about the idea of the readathon and the opportunity to help less fortunate children.
Imagine the media reporting about how so many poor children who never had anything themselves and were never able to think of themselves as a giver suddenly had something of value. Each hour they read was worth something.
Imagine that in addition to those making direct global pledges to donate something for every hour read, local businesses were making additional pledges to the schools in their communities or to a class or to sponsor an individual student. Statewide businesses may even pledge a donation for every hour read in their state.
Imagine local campaigns where students are reaching out to people in their communities to make small pledges to their class, as small as even only 1 penny for each hour read by the students in their class. And imagine this became a widely publicized competition. So which class has the highest pledge amount per hour read in their class or school?
Imagine communities, perhaps organized by Rotary or Lions, are organizing pledge events or declaring some day to be Pledge Day, where everyone is encouraged to make a small pledge to some class.
Imagine pledge days or events that are not about getting donation pledges, but about getting students to sign pledges that they will participate in the readathon or pledge how many hours they intended to read each day during the month.
And imagine there is even a global pledge day for both students to pledge how many hours they intended to read and for donors to pledge how much they would donate per hour read by the group they are sponsoring, a school, a class, a city, a state. Now, can you imagine all of this creating a compelling buzz that maximizes participation and maximizes the numbers of hours each student reads? Finally, imagine that in each classroom, every morning, they begin the day by reviewing how many hours the class has read so far and how many lives they will be changing due to the hours that they have read thus far, and perhaps setting goals for themselves to increase the number of hours they will read in the next days and weeks.
We began by saying we want you to be able to visualize.
Mobilizing a great number of young people to participate in an extended event that would leave them with a global citizen hero mindset.
And get people talking about such an initiative and the organizations promoting or sponsoring the initiative. For example, the UN and partners such as Rotary, etc.
Have we achieved that yet?
Can you imagine the buzz that would exist if all of the above mentioned publicity and incentive measures were implemented?
Can you visualize organizations, celebrities wanting to be viewed as associated with such an initiative?
And can you imagine how easy it would be to simply keep track and report how many hours a class within a school read over a month's time?
We now have a lot of excitement about what primary and lower secondary students were able to do, and many highly desirous to continue that excitement. Now is the time for the future we want, primary school competition. Imagine primary school classes around the globe discussing the future they want, to include better understanding what various parts of the world are like today, what major problems affect various parts of the world, and the value to the world and their local communities if all the SDGs were achieved in their area.
Imagine those classes then prepare a 3 to 5 minute presentation of the future they want that they then present in an assembly to other classes of their school. And after all of the classes have presented, all the students will vote for the presentation that will represent their school in its local competition.
Imagine tens of millions of people viewing dozens of Future We Want presentations of young people and voting for their favorites, with each presentation causing them to think again about what is important for their future and future of their children.
Imagine the pride among parents and school officials if their candidate wins. Why will the schools participate?
The prestigious opportunity for the school to have their students appearing in a global competition. Presentations could be altered between competition rounds so that more students from the school can play a role in the competition beyond just the original winning class. This would give more students a stake in the outcome.
Corporations and other businesses would be encouraged to offer additional interim prizes to supplement those offered by the competition. In other words, a local business may support the City X prize and a national corporation might sponsor the Country XYZ prize.
There could be additional prestige prizes at the various levels. For example, the winning team meeting with the mayor or the prime minister or minister of education, etc.
This is how it could work. After preparing their presentations and presenting at a school assembly to select the presentation that would represent their school, the winning presentation would then take recommendation for changes from all the students in their school and have the option of changing their presentation to expand the stakeholder base.
And then that presentation would then be recorded and submitted to the local level competition. There they would be integrated into a show format and made available to the local public to listen to the presentation and to vote for their favorites.
The winner at the local level will go on the regional level, then state, national, continental, and finally world levels.
There are many other aspects for this initiative. For example, don't forget that beyond the schools and students involved, it will include millions of other people watching and voting for the presentations they like the best. With each additional presentation they watch, they are getting additional perspectives to the world that could be there for themselves and their children.
That alone will be a tremendously valuable result of this initiative.
Students would be encouraged to lobby their parents, their neighbors, vote for them.
As students
And others
watch more and more presentations themselves, they get broader perspective about the future they would want and the problems that need to be overcome to achieve them.
Discussion guides for the teachers and students could be made available in many languages.
In addition, there are numerous sources of materials in many languages about what life is like in different parts of the world and about the SDGs.
Now that we have some nice momentum going for thinking about the future we want, how can we up the momentum? Imagine that a song about the future we want and the problems to be overcome to get there was the most listened to song in the world.
And imagine that tens of millions of people had actually participated in making this song successful and therefore had a special identification with this song, and it was becoming an earworm, the kind of song that you can't get out of your head. People were humming the song everywhere they went.
Imagine that a great number of people who participated in the voting will be hearing a great number of songs all about the future we want. By the time they're finished, many people are likely to have the future we want on their brain.
How would it attract musicians?
What if, following the massively popular readathon in Future We Want presentation competition, a number of top music producers, record labels, and top world artists were to make an announcement calling on current and would-be songwriters to participate in a global competition to come up with songs that best portray Vision 2030, the future we want, and the problems that have to be overcome to get there.
What if the competition included TV and internet channel appearances modeled after famous TV talent shows like America's Got Talent and The Voice, and numerous publicity opportunities?
And finally, the idea that the winning song will be sung by the top world artists similar to the We Are the World recording. In fact, what if numerous music celebrities were joining in promoting the competition along with many professional associations of musicians and associations of teachers of music?
Can you imagine? That would result in almost no one with any interest in music not knowing about the competition.
Can you imagine that a great number of musicians be motivated to try to write a killer song for this competition?
Why will musicians, labels, others be interested in promoting such a competition?
Musicians are also people, and many are happy to support good causes when they can.
Not to mention, many will see this as an opportunity to promote their profession and grow the interest of young people to become musicians and songwriters.
For many, if they believe this initiative will be talked about in public for some time, this is an opportunity to get their brand associated with a good cause and and mix with other movers and shakers of the industry.
Why would artists be interested in being part of recording the winning song in such a competition?
For many artists, if there was going to be a recording by top artists of that time, I would not want to be left out of that group.
It could work very similar to the Future We Want presentation competition. First, candidates could present their songs in a local competition.
The local public would be invited to vote for what they felt was the best song.
Winner at the local level would move on to the regional level.
The winner at the regional level would then move on to the state and the national, continental, and world levels.
Can you see how such a competition could attract a large number of candidates, a large number of voters, a large number of listeners?
You know, it's possible that this initiative might even get many songwriters, artists, and music producers to realize that there's an appetite for song about Vision 2030, the SDGs, and the masses coming together to better the world. That might lead to many songs being released on these themes.
And also songs about setting high goals, aiming for the stars, and never giving up.
Thank you for painting that picture of a path by which hundreds of millions of people could be engaged in thinking and acting about the future we want, and even becoming conditioned to do things that make that vision a reality. Would you like to make some summarizing remarks?
To start off, we said that the goals should be set based on what is needed and not what we think we can do. But then we also said that the goal is to get a significant share of the world's population to recognize the need for and value of multilateralism to combat the many, some existential problems facing the world. To that end, we described several initiatives that could result in hundreds of millions of young students around the world participating in a readathon to improve reading skills while reducing the number of children in the world not in school due to hunger and extreme poverty.
And could result in hundreds of millions of students and their families being very proud to have been declared global citizen heroes because the hours they read changed and maybe saved the lives of millions of the world's poorest children.
And could result in tens or hundreds of millions of people supporting the reading efforts of their community's children by participating in community pep rallies and award ceremonies or pledging some donation for each hour students read, regardless how small, to address a major cause.
And in millions of young students discussing the future they want and the challenges involved in getting there and preparing presentations to compete in a global competition to identify the best presentations of Vision 2030, the future we want.
And result in tens of thousands of amateurs and professional songwriters writing songs about Vision 2030, the future we want.
And tens or hundreds of millions of people watching or listening to many presentations and songs about Vision 2030, the future we want, and voting or lobbying for the ones that they think are best.
And songs about the future we want and the struggle to get there being the most listened to songs in the world.
Would you agree that these are highly desirable outcomes? Do you think these will result in many people becoming aware of the challenges facing the world and becoming believers that people can do great things when they work together?
Vision 2030, the world that could be if all the SDGs were accomplished, can be achieved by actions of a few 100,000 or even a few tens of millions. It will take the majority of the population of the world pulling together on the same road in the same directions at the same time.
We described the sequence of events we might imagine would result in a high participation rate. They are open issues as to whether we can pull off these events. But if we can pull off a significant share of them, can you see them resulting in the participation of a large share of students around the world, and such participation having impact on families and on those participating in rallies and those pledging donations and those participating in honoring ceremonies and those voting for their favorite future we want presentations and songs and those listening to songs about the future we want and those watching and reading news about the initiatives and the issues and about local participants?
As we said in the beginning, action starts with believing there is a path that could lead to the desired results. I hope most of you now see a path that could have great impact.
Now we have a challenge for all of you. If you think this initiative will be worthwhile and doable, tell your friends and everyone you can think of and ask them to pass them along. Get others imagining what can be done and recalibrating their own goal. In particular, communicate them to national and world leaders and people of influence. Let's make sure that the Secretary General, Bill Gates, and so on don't wake up a year later with little to show for UN75 and wishing they had known about the possibilities earlier.
In other words, join the movement and let's aim high and change the world. Let's
Dare to
to
be
be great.
Well, I think you presented a credible path to mobilizing hundreds of millions and changing attitude, not only about the future we'd like to have and the problems we'll have to jointly overcome to achieve that future, but you've also presented a path that is likely to result in the very meaning of the word impossible being redefined for tens and hundreds of millions of people around the world. You said you wanted to get the audience imagining what it would mean for the mindset of the world and for having a chance to achieve the SDGs if hundreds of millions were to be actively engaged in pumping up the desire for a better world and actively engaged in some activities to dramatically better the world. And seeing the program of initiatives as a viable path that could result in getting hundreds of millions of young people to act in a way that both brings about a great good in the world, but that also shapes their attitude about wanting to do significant good and their confidence in being able to have massive impact in the world. And in the thinking that this is totally doable and should be done. I think you succeeded in that. Thank you.